I don't know if you guys saw my video on my Tesla Model S speed test, but there's a reason I did that video. It's because the Tesla Model S for kids arrived, and it's this massive box, and I was like, I need to do something with this right now because it's a huge box taking up a lot of space. That said, a couple more huge boxes have arrived, this time from Corsair, so I'm going to open these and show you guys what's inside.
Excellent!
Cooler Master's SK series mechanical keyboards help you keep a low profile with ultra-flat double-shot keycaps and a slim minimalist design. Available in full-size trim as the SK650 or the even more portable 10-keyless SK630, these keyboards feel great thanks to genuine Cherry MX low-profile mechanical switches. They've also got a durable brushed aluminum top plate and a detachable and braided USB Type-C cable, so click the sponsor link in the description for more on the Cooler Master SK630 and SK650.
Joe said I should go with the long skinny box first before the short wide box, so Joe usually gives pretty good advice. We're gonna stick with that. This is from Corsair, and I already know vaguely what's inside here. It's their Hydro X series of open loop water cooling gear. We actually have a mix of stuff in here because they are sending some of their existing products like fans, because Corsair already makes like 90% of the parts in a computer. Maybe that's taking it a little bit too far, but everything except like processors, graphics cards, and motherboards, Corsair pretty much makes. Now they are expanding from just doing all-in-one closed-loop liquid coolers like their existing Hydro series to the Hydro X series of open-loop coolers. And they are going all out with this, which means everything from the liquid coolant inside to the pumps, the blocks, the reservoirs, the fittings, you can now get directly from Corsair. So these are the parts that Corsair's actually designed and manufactured themselves. They're doing a bunch of collaboration with a lot of the different parts because there's quite a few established water cooling parts manufacturers that are out there, and Corsair has sort of taken on some of their stuff. So like the fittings, for example, are made by Bits Power. The coolant is done by Mayhems. The radiators are by Hardware Labs, and the blocks and the pumps Corsair has been doing themselves. So we have a couple blocks here, the XG7 RGB. The blocks that they're producing for GPUs are going to have a range of compatibility with higher end graphics cards because that's really all you should be bothering to water cool. They're supporting 2070s, 2080s, and 2080 Ti's when it comes to NVIDIA's RTX series. They're also supporting 1080 Ti's if you look at the last generation from NVIDIA. And then for AMD, they're supporting the Vega 56 and Vega 64. Not sure about the Radeon 7, and then I'm hoping that they will update to also support the Navi cards when they come out, but we'll wait and see on those. So I have two of the XG7 RGB GPU blocks. I also have two of the CPU blocks, the XC9 and the XC7, because they have two different variants of these. The XC7 basically is for mainstream water cooling, so it's going to fit your Intel LGA 1150 whatever. So pretty much any current generation Intel mainstream socket that should fit. And then for AMD, you have AM4 compatibility. Hooray! So you can use these with Ryzen 1st, 2nd, or 3rd gen. The XC9 is a big daddy, so this one's going to support LGA 2066 as well as AMD socket Threadripper TR4, or the Threadripper socket. So if you're cooling a high-end desktop, then you'll want the XC9. And then finally, the pump reservoir combo unit, the XD5 RGB, which uses a Lang D5 for the pump, and then the actual housing and reservoir are all manufactured and designed by Corsair. Uses actually nylon rather than acrylic for the housing, so they say that has some benefits to it. For example, you don't get some of the micro cracks that you can get if you're using an acrylic housing. And then the final piece of this that Corsair has put together on their website is a configuration software, or just a web-based configuration utility, because they're trying to sort of open up the open loop water cooling market to people who might have been a little bit intimidated by it before. For that purpose, the online configurator will allow you to go in, choose your case, and then get the parts you need to get all the pieces to put together a loop like this. And I think I'm going to try that later on in this video to sort of see how it works, because it is now available and you can now use it. But let's get into a little bit more detail by opening up these things. Where should I start? Let's go with the pump. So here's what's included with the pump, the XD5 RGB. We got installation manual and warranty guide. We have some screws. These are little thumb screws. They look pretty nice. So having a nice finish on everything is going to be, I think, one of the key points that Corsair is trying to hit here, because let's face it, if people are going the extra length to water cool with an open loop in their system, there's probably at least a little bit of an aesthetic concern going on apart from just the improved cooling. So having nice fittings is good for that. A couple more screws here for attaching the pump to these brackets, as well as this extension bracket here. So we have a single bracket that the pump kind of sits down in. That is the D5 pump down there at the bottom. And then that can then attach to either of these brackets. So you have 120 millimeter for attaching it to a 120 millimeter mounting point on a radiator or directly to a fan. Then 140 millimeter, and these are on rails, so you can move the pump assembly up and down to position it where you need it to go. More screws and washers for mounting the pump to the bracket, mounting the bracket to the case. We also have this little add-on, which I think is pretty nice. This is a temperature sensor. So it's just a little G 1/4 plug, and then on the inside you get a temperature sensor. So you're just going to attach that on an unused G 1/4 fitting here on the pump itself, or you could put it elsewhere in your loop if you wanted. As long as it's got water flowing over it, then it's going to be able to tell you the temperature of your liquid, and that's important in a water cooling loop because you usually want to make sure your liquid stays below about 60 degrees Celsius. You got some additional plugs for capping off the ports that you don't use. This is a plug tool, which is just basically a flathead for screwing in or unscrewing those. These are plastic, in case you're wondering. They have included a power supply end cap for shorting your power supply so that you can test your custom loop once it's all set up without turning on power to your entire system, because when you're leak testing, you don't want to have power running to your whole system. You want to make sure you're just powering the power supply and the water cooling parts. And then finally we have the pump and reservoir combo unit itself. This is a little bracket. This is metal. It's got sort of a darkened chrome finish, so that's nice. As for the pump and reservoir unit itself, one thing I kind of like about this is, well, I mean, they're going with nylon, and according to Corsair, this is a very premium nylon that they've gone with instead of acrylic for the actual housing of the reservoir. It does look clean and clear though. There is a Corsair logo with an array of sort of cross beams in there. That's a baffle to prevent a whirlpool effect from happening. There are multiple inlets and outlets. They are not marked here, but I imagine that would be indicated in the manual. One on this side, two on this side, one more on this side. There's only one blank spot on one side there. Mounting points here are slightly rubberized, so that should help to dampen some of the vibration. And then there's an LED array at the top here. It looks like 8 addressable LEDs that are in there, as well as 2 additional inlets up here. And one of them does have a downspout, so you can prevent air from getting into that if you're going with a waterfall. Looks like the Corsair logo on the top here should also shine through and light up with the LEDs connected. And then this can be daisy chained. One thing I do want to point out when it comes to the LEDs, since they're all addressable, and since this is Corsair, they're all going to need to plug into a Corsair control unit, such as the Commander Pro. So that is something to take into consideration. This does allow you to use the Corsair software, which is pretty flexible. I've been using it in my Riptide setup, but just something you should keep in mind if you're planning on setting up a loop with this hardware, and especially if you want those RGB effects to work. Let's take a look at these CPU blocks next. So here are the CPU blocks, the XC7 right here in the black finish, and then the XC9, they're both RGB here in the silver finish. Interesting thing about these, I think, is going to be the sort of Asetek-ish mounting system they have for the brackets here. It's got a honeycomb pattern of pre-applied thermal paste that's on the bottom. But if you've ever used one of Corsair's existing all-in-one liquid coolers with an Asetek mount on it, these are reminding me very, very much of those. So it's just got a bracket there. That's the Intel one that it comes shipped with. But if you want to swap over to AM4, for example, you just grab this one, install it like so, and now you can fit that on an AMD socket. Another kind of cool thing about that mounting method is actually that you can rotate these. So if you wanted, for example, to give yourself sort of a jaunty 45-degree angle by going like that, gives you a little bit more flexibility as far as how you're installing the water block when it comes to orientation. Basically, there's 8 different configurations you could put. You could rotate it all the way around if you wanted to. Beyond that, you've got your mounting hardware here, manuals, of course, some very, very thin little nylon spacers, and then, of course, the back plate, which is going to be universal for both AMD and Intel sockets. Now, the clear parts here that let you see the liquid flow as well as the RGB lighting shine through is injection molded nylon for these pieces. Again, you have a light up Corsair logo, and there is a slight variation between these two. This one here has a slightly smaller cooling plate with 60 micro fins that the liquid flows across to provide cooling. And then this top piece here in black is also plastic with this one, whereas with the LGA 2066 and socket Threadripper version, you get an aluminum top piece there. So it is metal. And then you get a slightly larger cooling plate here with 70 micro cooling fins instead of the 60 that you get with the XC7. So those are the premium features for the high-end desktop version, the XC9 compared to the XC7. It does seem to have pretty much the same same mounting hardware. And then again, pretty much the same reconfiguration method you have here. This is the Intel socket for LGA 2066. And then for Threadripper, they have included this bracket, which you would simply swap out. Both of them have a nice sort of dark chrome finish. Oh, and one last thing to add is that both of these have 16 addressable LEDs arrayed in there. And again, they still have the Corsair required connection system. Next is the XG7 RGB GPU blocks, and these are slightly reconfigurable from Corsair's side. So this one here, for example, is set up for an RTX 2080 Founders Edition. This one is set up for the RTX 2080 Ti Founders Edition. They should be very similar otherwise, though. Let's start with the 2080 Ti, and like I said, there's not going to be a whole lot difference between these. It's just a matter of changing up the jet plate on the bottom, I believe. Along with the block itself, we have some more caps here, as well as one of those cap screwing tools. We have a little product manual. They do include a back plate, so that's nice. You don't have to buy that separately. This is aluminum here, as well as the exterior housing on the GPU block itself. So there's an internal part here, which is actually a block that covers not just the GPU, but power delivery and memory components as well. So from here you can see this is basically all nickel-plated copper, and then the exterior part that is black is all aluminum aside from that. You still have some wires here for the addressable RGB LEDs. There's 16 of those, and then it's a CNC milled copper heat plate underneath this machined acrylic top section. There's also a flow indicator. You should be able to see that spinning while your loop is up and running, so you make sure you have water flowing through your graphics card. And you can kind of see there's sort of a Dominator Platinum kind of style, I feel like, termination here for your inlets and your outlets, and you can of course go top or bottom for either of those. So again, just providing some flexibility for how you configure your loop once you have everything set up. Again, there's a Corsair logo on the side as well as GeForce RTX logo, and those thermal pads being pre-applied. Hey, that's nice. You know, cutting little thermal pads to size is one of those sort of tedious tasks for installing a GPU block. And then we also have thermal paste pre-applied under that little cover as well. And here's a quick look at the back plates. Got sort of a matte section with the Hydro X logo and the Corsair sails beneath that, and then brushed aluminum finish. Then when it comes to the 2080, basically the accessories and everything else that is included is exactly the same. And now I've kind of figured out how they're doing this. So this entire section right here can be swapped out depending on the GPU that they're configuring it with. So the top here is going to look pretty much the same and fairly universal. And then they'll swap that out depending on which GPU they're setting it up for. So we have a slightly different layout here for the 2080 as compared to the 2080 Ti. And now the remainder of the parts, and again, a lot of this stuff was done in collaboration with some other existing water cooling manufacturers that are on the market. So I will repeat that as we come to each one, but I wanted to get at least each of these out of the box so we can take a quick look. Starting with the tubing. This is acrylic tubing, not PETG. Corsair is not currently planning to do PETG. This is 10 millimeter inner diameter and 14 millimeter outer diameter, and one of these packs comes with 3 tubes. Not too much else to say about that. It's PMMA if you wanted a more specific type of acrylic that's being used. Corsair is also doing softline tubing, so this is a clear PVC, 10 millimeter inner diameter, 13 millimeter outer diameter. This just provides some flexibility because there are benefits to either option. I would say the acrylic is more of an aesthetic choice. Softline tubing can give you a bit more flexibility. Yes, that's kind of a pun, but it is also more flexible. And this will also allow you to do some maintenance on your system a bit more easily. That is why the only system that I am currently running that's water cooled that I use on a regular basis that I'd be very upset if it didn't work properly is Riptide, and that uses soft tubing as well as quick disconnects, so that if I ever had anything go wrong, I could at least get things reconfigured to have the system up and running and I wouldn't have too much downtime. That said, we now have a bunch of different fittings and adapters here, so I'll open those up and show you a few of those. But before that, here is their liquid. This is called XL5, and they have sent me the clear liquid. The coolants, they're actually working with Mayhems, and Mayhems has a lot of experience doing coolant. It's going to be available in green, red, blue, purple, and this clear, and then they might add pastels in the future depending on the response and how many they sell, basically, is where that comes from. Corsair says the coolant works with copper, brass, and nickel, and has advanced non-toxic anti-corrosion inhibitors as well as antibacterial growth suppressors. So You should be able to just use this coolant without adding anything else, and you won't have any icky stuff growing in your loop, or corrosion, of course. Corrosion's bad. Just make sure you're not including any aluminum parts in your loop that touch water, because mixed metals is bad. Radiators. I almost forgot the radiators. These are actually being done in collaboration with Hardware Labs, and they say they're going to have a pretty wide range of these available. They sent me the XR5, well, they're called XR5. They sent me the 240 millimeter and 360 millimeter. Accessory-wise, they've set you up with enough screws to do a push-pull configuration or a push or pull with short screws on the other side for mounting to the case. And this looks to be a pretty standard-looking radiator. It does have sort of a matte paint finish on the outside, which I think looks pretty nice. Corsair logos, of course. I'm going to say medium fin density here. It's not looking too dense, but not too loose either. So that should give you a balance between airflow and actual heat dissipation. Got 2 G1/4 fittings on the ends for inlet and outlet, and then a pretty standard 240 millimeter layout. This one obviously has a black finish. No note on whether Corsair is going to do any other colors for these. I would think maybe they'll do a white lineup at some point, but again, that's going to probably depend on the popularity of these parts when they actually hit the market. And regular sizes and thicknesses should be available. So 120 millimeter should go all the way up to 480 millimeter or 4x120, or all the way down to single 120. And then for 140 millimeter rads, that'll go up to 420 millimeters. So 3x140, 2x140, or 1x140 should all be available. And here's the 360 millimeter variant, which is one longer, isn't it? Here are the fittings and adapters that Corsair sent over for hardline tubing. They have these low profile ones. These comes in packs of 4. They also have 90-degree adapter fittings here, which are nice to have if you're working in a narrow space. These come in packs of 2. These are all going to have the chrome finish, by the way, but the fittings will be available in black, silver, white, or polished brass. Again, more might be available depending on market reception. These are adapters, so we got some 45-degree rotary adapters and some 90-degree rotary adapters. These come in packs of 2. We have a ball valve that you could use for a drain or something like that. We have a fill port that you could install into a case, single packs of those. We have a Y-splitter adapter, just a single pack of that as well. And then the compression fittings over here for soft tubing, these come in packs of 4. And here's a quick look at our fittings and adapters. And I will say that I could not agree more with Corsair's decision to partner with Bits Power for these, because Bits Power, in my experience, makes really good fittings and adapters. You can just tell by sort of the tightness with which these rotary fittings actually go together. So these are the chrome ones, and you might notice that Corsair has fairly limited branding. This one actually has the Corsair logo on a couple sides. This is just a little Y adapter. Here's a fill port as well, and again, I can just kind of tell by how smooth the threading is, and nice tight fitting with the O-rings there as well. But that's just pretty simple fill port. Here is the ball valve. Corsair logo on the side there. There's a bit more room there, so they were able to display that all the way. Just give it a twist, closes it off. Twist it that way, opens it back up. Here's a compression fitting. You can see the barbs on this side, and this is for the soft tubing. This one has sort of the rough textured area around the outside, so that's helpful for gripping. Here are our angled adapters, and I've used quite a few of these from Bits Power, and I actually love that these do not have logos on them. When I've used Bits Power fittings in the past, I've sometimes felt like, man, there's a Bits Power logo everywhere. So now you can kind of like get Bits Power fittings, which can be a little bit harder to come across in the US, without Bits Power logos on them, and just buy them directly from Corsair with Corsair warranty and support and everything. I just attach these two together. There's a 90-degree and a 45-degree. Then finally we have our hardline fittings here, and these are for the 14mm outer diameter. And I like how low profile these are, because that can be a challenge with hardline tubing, is getting the right length. And depending on how you're doing your measurements and everything, sometimes having a low profile fitting that's already on there can give you a little bit better idea of how to line things up and measure it appropriately. But as you can see, O-ring goes on there, and then you got the cap, and that fits on the top. Of course, your compression tubing would go in there as well. So it is nice that they're able to keep these as low profile and small as they are. And then here's the 90-degree adapter for the hardline tubing, and this basically has fittings on both sides. So if you're doing a build that you're not doing a bunch of bends in your hardline tubing, and you're doing the fittings for doing the 90-degree angles everywhere, these are actually pretty handy for that, because you've got the fittings on both ends, whereas sometimes you have to use like an adapter and then a fitting on the end of the adapter, and in that case you're paying money for the adapter as well as the fitting on the end, so that might be, I don't know, maybe slightly more cost effective depending on the type of build you're doing. So if you're looking at all this and you're like, hey, that sounds good, sign me up, or if you just want to see how much it would cost, because hi big boy, you're such a special boy, you are. So if you're looking at all this and you're like, hey, that sounds great, sign me up. Or if you just want to speculate and see how much it would cost for you, Corsair has a configuration utility over on their website. I will link it down in the description. And I'm just going to go through with the stuff that I have here and see how much it all would cost. Of course, you got to start by choosing your case. And I'll be honest, I originally thought, hey, Corsair's just going to have Corsair cases to choose from, but they also have other brands too. So good on you, Corsair, for not forcing people to just use your cases. And just as a proof of concept, I'm going to use the Phanteks N2 Evolve X. I guess the configurator will actually show you your system once you've set it up, but it only does that with the Corsair cases, not third-party cases. So in order to show that, I guess I'm going to go back and choose a Corsair case. I'm just going to go with the 570X because it's very clear and there's lots of stuff in there. And I'm really just going to choose very quickly different things. So after choosing your case, motherboard, CPU, and graphics card, they automatically set you up with what they think is an ideal configuration. So let's see what their recommended setup is. For the water block here, we have the XC7. That's not too surprising. For the GPU block, we have the XG7. Not surprising either. Cooling performance. We have a 360mm radiator in the front. We also have some options for 240, or let's do dual radiator. We got a 120 in the back as well. Hey, this thing actually seems pretty smart. It's deducting the number of fans that the case comes with and only giving you more fans to fill everything else out. Corsair sent me these ML ones though, so I guess I better choose those. Pump style, the one that they have, we'll choose that. Here's where we choose between soft and hard tubing. They have sent me both. I'm gonna choose the hard tubing though, because that's probably what I'll build with. And they sent me the 1014 stuff, so we'll choose that as well. Clear coolant and chrome fittings is what I have, so let's go ahead with that. We do need something to connect up all of our RGB stuff. They sent me a Commander Pro, so, oh look, the fan pack already has IQ integration, so that's not been included. I can add more controllers on though, such as a Commander Pro. Oh, and a lot of Corsair cases come with control hubs as well, so that's nice. And then it looks like they also kit you out with kind of the basic number of fittings that they think you will need in order to set up your loop, including the hardline tubing, the XL5 coolant that's also included, and then you've got some 4-packs of compression fittings as well as some rotary adapters. Could add some 45 degrees as well if I wanted to, and I do have some of those, so I'll add one on. And there we go. This is my configuration. $880 is what it's going to cost me, which might be a bargain if you do a lot of liquid cooling stuff, or it might be very expensive if you're comparing it to the cost of like all-in-one loops or air coolers, for example. But water block is $75, GPU block is $150. These two radiators together are $115. The fans are very expensive. That's adding $140, so cutting down on those would definitely cut down on the price. The pump and reservoir combo unit is $155. All of my fittings and whatnot are about $120. My fittings, tubing, and liquid is about $120. It's another $70 for the Commander Pro, and then another $60 or so for the addition of some adapters. I did find the fill bottle. You can add that on for $2.99. So I haven't tested this out too much by throwing extra stuff in there, but it seems like a pretty well thought out and easy to use online utility for figuring out what you need to go in your liquid cooling setup. But that is going to wrap it up for this video though, guys. I am going to be doing a build with this stuff, although I still am not 100% sure of all the rest of the parts I'm going to put in there. Obviously, I should be using an RTX 2080 or a 2080 Ti in order to use the GPU blocks that I have. But I got a wide range of choices when it comes to CPUs, so let me know in the comment section down below what type of system you think I should be putting together. You guys want Intel or AMD? And I will do my very best to accommodate what you request. No promises though, of course. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hit the thumbs up button if you did, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos coming at you real soon. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.